listening to Your Secret is Safe with Me, non-judgmental talk about infidelity with Dr. Marie Murphy. If you're looking for new perspectives on complicated relationship issues, you've come to the right place.
Days go by, they're crawling by.
Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Marie Murphy. I'm a relationship coach and I specialize in infidelity. If you are cheating on your partner or engaging in anything you think counts as infidelity, I can help you deal with your feelings, clarify what you want, and make decisions about what you're going to do. No shame, no blame, no judgments. Part of what I offer my clients is a safe space to be completely honest about all the details of your situation, no matter how sordid, no matter how scandalous, no matter how conflicted you may feel about engaging in them. But the other thing I do is help you deal with your situation in a way that's truly right for you. So if you're interested in working with me, you can schedule an introductory coaching session with me through my website, mariemurphyphd.com. All right. As I have been talking about on the last few podcast episodes, the holidays, which we're in the midst of, the winter holidays in the United States right now, the holidays are such an interesting time of year in so many different ways for so many different reasons. And this can have all kinds of implications for our relationships, and it can have so many kinds of implications for our relationships that involve infidelity. And in today's episode, I'm going to talk about the potential for the holidays to be a time of nostalgia and sentimentality and reminiscence, and how this might apply to you if you have a spouse or a partner and perhaps also kids, and you're also having a relationship with someone else and your spouse or your partner does not know about this relationship. So in other words, you're having an affair. And maybe your affair got started earlier this year, meaning earlier in 2021, or maybe it's been going on for longer than that, but things just started to heat up a little bit more in the last several months. Maybe lately, you and your affair partner have started to talk about creating a future together, or started making plans together, or started making promises to each other. Maybe you straight up told your affair partner that you were going to talk to your spouse about divorce. Maybe you even put a time frame on talking to your spouse about divorce. And maybe you meant everything you said when you said it. And then something interesting happened. The holidays rolled around. First, it was almost Thanksgiving, and then it was actually Thanksgiving. And then other holiday events and traditions began to ensue. And then you started to feel kind of funny. First and foremost, you had to, quote unquote, spend more time with your spouse and your kids. And maybe you had to spend more time with your extended family too. And of course, that's not exactly right. You didn't have to spend time with them, right? We don't have to do anything, but you chose to because it seemed like the only thing to do. Your spouse doesn't know about your affair after all. And moreover, as far as they know, everything is more or less fine in your relationship. And as excited as you've been about your affair partner, you weren't particularly ready to initiate talks with your spouse about getting divorced during the holidays. So it seemed pretty obvious to you that the only choice you could reasonably make was to go along with all of your usual holiday traditions and rituals as you would under normal circumstances. But you spending all of this time with your family has not been well received by your affair partner. They thought that things had gotten to the point with the two of you that you were going to start checking out of your marriage or your partnership in more significant ways. They were looking forward to spending time with you during the holidays, and they thought they were going to be able to take you to a holiday party or two, or maybe introduce them to some of their family members, or start showing you off to their friends and being able to be somewhat open about your relationship. But instead, maybe you went out of town for Thanksgiving with your spouse and your kids. And maybe you didn't tell your affair partner you were going to do that until the very last moment. And then maybe your in-laws came to visit for Hanukkah, or maybe they're coming for Christmas. And maybe you're going out of town again with your family for New Year's, or, something like that. And maybe amidst all of this family stuff, you aren't making any particular effort to sneak off and see your affair partner, even though you really know that they really want you to. And maybe you weren't responding to their text messages or their signal messages or whatever encrypted app you use to communicate with your affair partner as often as you usually do. Maybe you're kind of like not exactly giving them the silent treatment, but not being as available as you usually are, right? And your affair partner may have noticed all of this, and they may have communicated to you that they're noticing this, and they may be very unhappy about much of this, and they may have informed you of this unhappiness quite explicitly and perhaps quite frequently. And on their end, they may be completely shocked that you are seemingly retreating into your normal family routines instead of prioritizing spending time with them. And, on the one hand, maybe you get it. Maybe you totally understand, because maybe you just told them in mid to late October that you were madly in love with them and you want to spend the rest of your life with them, and you can't wait to get a divorce so that the two of you can have a relationship outside of the affair bubble and live happily ever after together. Maybe you told them all sorts of things like that. And now you're doing a bunch of things that you realize might seem somewhat contradictory to all of those statements you made. And you care about your affair partner, and you care about their feelings, and you don't really want to do anything that would hurt them. But now they're clearly hurt, and maybe you feel very guilty about that. And you feel very bad about not living up to their expectations, or not even living up to the things that you said you were going to do. But at the same time, you've also discovered that you kind of want to have your family time. You're realizing that you're realizing that you actually really want to execute all of the holiday traditions and rituals with your spouse and your kids and your extended family. And you're a little surprised by this, because you thought you were so done with your marriage, and you thought you were so ready for divorce, and you thought you were totally excited about your future with your affair partner. And now you're like spending time with your in-laws and loving it in a way you never have before. And maybe you're also wishing that your affair partner could just give you a little space to do your own thing during the holidays. This is your family after all. Doesn't your affair partner understand that you have obligations to spend time with them, since you are, in fact, still married? And along those lines, maybe you're starting to wonder if you might have been just a tiny bit hasty in telling yourself and your affair partner that you were ready to leave your family. Maybe you are, but maybe you aren't. All of this holiday stuff, all of the return to tradition and reminders of your shared past and the bonds you've shared for so long may be really pulling at your heartstrings. So what's going on? Is it nostalgia? Is it a reminder of all that's truly important to you in life? Are you actually more interested in continuing a relationship with your spouse than you thought you were? Are you not as into your affair partner as you thought you were? Or are you just relieved to have a little break from the drama of your affair for a while? Is it the comfort of home and holiday traditions and the familiarity of family that's drawing you in? Or is it all of the above and then some? Well, if you're in a situation like the one I just described, you may be wondering all of these things and more. You may be quite surprised by the shifts in your emotions and surprised by your own actions. Just a few weeks ago, you may have been inventing any excuse to run off to have passionate, crazy sex with your affair partner, or run off and read poetry to your affair partner, or run off and, bake lasagna with your affair partner, or whatever it is you love to do. It doesn't have to be sex that's like super exciting, right? And now you're barely thinking about them. And well, maybe not barely thinking about them, but you're certainly not running off like at the drop of a hat to go make lasagna, right? And at the same time, you're feeling this flood of affection for your spouse. And you're surprised by these shifts. And thus you're trying to figure out what exactly they mean. What are these pendulum swings within your heart? What's going on here? What to make of this? And you may have no idea what to make of this. And meanwhile, your affair partner may be asking you what your actions mean. So you may feel a lot of pressure to figure it out and explain yourself to them. And on top of that, you may feel some pressure or a genuine desire to be the person your family thinks you are, to be the person your spouse knows you to be. And all of this put together can feel like a whole lot of conflict and confusion and turmoil and God knows what else. And you may have an intense desire to either figure out some sort of ultimate solution as quickly as possible or to avoid the whole thing entirely. And that could result in behaviors like you breaking it off with your affair partner abruptly because you don't know what else to do about your conflicting feelings, or perhaps ignoring your affair partner until after New Year's because you just don't know what to say to them. Or it could look like you making a dramatic confession to your spouse about your affair and telling them that you're so sorry and you're going to cut the whole thing off immediately and you're going to spend the rest of your life making it up to them. It could look like any number of impulsive actions, right? And all of these sorts of impulses are understandable. When we are faced with a situation that seems like a problem to us, or when we are experiencing a lot of internal conflict, we often want to do something as soon as possible to fix the problem and relieve us of our discomfort. And this can seem like a totally logical and rational thing to do when we're in the midst of a difficult moment. But here's the problem with that. When emotion is high, intelligence is low. When you're experiencing a bunch of intense emotions or intense and conflicting emotions, the chances of you making decisions or taking actions that line up with your long-term desires are not all that great, right? There are times in life when we need to make big decisions really quickly, even when our emotions are high. So for instance, in the midst of a medical emergency, we may have to think fast and act fast in the midst of very intense emotions. But that's the exception rather than the rule. There are so many situations in life that seem really urgent or seem like emergencies, but actually are not. And when we don't know how to feel our feelings without resisting them or avoiding them or reacting to them, experiencing intensely uncomfortable feelings can definitely seem like an emergency, right? I'll say that again. Experiencing intensely uncomfortable feelings can definitely seem like an emergency. And believe me, this used to be the case for me 100%. I used to totally think that intense emotional discomfort was a sure sign that something was wrong, there was an emergency at hand, and something needed to be done to fix the situation immediately. It was a really fun way to live, I assure you. But I mean, this is totally understandable because most of us learn so little about our feelings and how to deal with them, especially the uncomfortable ones. So if you've been in a situation like this where you're panicking about something and you think you need to do something to fix the problem immediately, you're certainly not alone and there's definitely nothing wrong with you. But that said, many of our intense emotional experiences that seem like emergencies are not actually emergencies that require us to take immediate action. In fact, it is often wise to slow down and not attempt to resolve anything in a hurry when we're feeling intensely conflicted or confused or panicked. Again, when emotion is high, intelligence is low. So when we've got a bunch of intense conflicting emotions going on, the best thing we can do for ourselves is usually to slow down. As they say, don't just do something, stand there. You do not have to resolve all of your internal conflicts instantly. You don't even have to resolve them quickly. Intense emotional experiences may feel intense, but that does not mean that they are emergencies that require immediate action. Now, just getting your head around this idea, just accepting that this could possibly be true can be life-changing. Because when we're faced with a conundrum of some sort, especially a conundrum we feel uncomfortable with, we tend to want to do one of two things. We may want to take action right away as soon as possible to fix the problem or resolve the conflict. Or we may be inclined to attempt to figure out what to do to solve the problem, meaning we engage in very intensive thinking about our situation. We may attempt to analyze all of the angles or predict future outcomes or anticipate what other people might do or say or feel, or any number of other cognitive endeavors, right? And, I think it's fair to say that just about everything we ever learn suggests that these are appropriate responses to dealing with a situation we think of as a problem. Do something and do it quickly, or think really long and hard about something and figure out a solution, right? And these kinds of approaches may serve us really well in other areas of our lives, right? What we do for a living may require us to respond to things really quickly or engage in a lot of thinking and interpretation and analysis. For instance, if you're an academic or a lawyer, thinking and interpretation and analysis may be what you spend all of your work time doing, and it may be the avenue to productivity in your professional life. So when our emotions are running high, overthinking and overanalyzing and overinterpreting can seem like a totally appropriate strategy for dealing with the situation if we use these techniques to problem solve in other areas of our lives. What this might look like in practice is ruminating continuously or endlessly on what you think your sudden bout of nostalgia means, or trying to figure out why your feelings about your marriage and your affair change so rapidly, or attempting to predict how you will feel about your spouse or your affair partner or both after the holidays, or looking for reasons from your past about why you are the way you are and why you're in this predicament right now, or trying to predict how bad it would be if you were to break things off with your affair partner after pledging your undying eternal love to them, or anything else along those lines. This kind of thinking may seem really compelling, but it doesn't actually do much other than tell and retell yourself a bunch of stories, right? As we talked about a few episodes ago, our brains are these meaning-making machines. And in a way, this is great. The meanings we assign to our life situations give our lives richness, right? But they also can drive us crazy. And there are times when thinking is really useful and times when thinking isn't useful at all. There's a big difference between indulging your thoughts and letting your meaning-making machine run wild, meaning your mind, and examining the facts of your circumstances and what you think about them. So put differently, there are productive ways to work with our thoughts. And this is part of the work that I do with my clients. And there are also unproductive ways to work with our thoughts, right? And similarly, if you're used to taking action to solve problems, it may seem really reasonable to try and do something to make your situation better and as quickly as possible. Let's say your job involves putting out fires, literally or metaphorically, right? If that's what you do for work, it may seem totally appropriate to you to take swift action to whatever you perceive the fire to be in your relationship situation. And like I said earlier, that might mean breaking up with your affair partner as quickly as possible, because now you have all of these strong feelings for your spouse again, and you think it's not fair to your affair partner to continue a relationship with them if you're feeling all this love for your spouse that you didn't know you still felt, right? Or it might mean suddenly deciding to tell your spouse about your affair so that at least you'll have all of your newfound guilt off of your chest or whatever. It could mean a number of things. Instead of trying to take action to solve the problem, instead of trying to figure out how to resolve your conflict right away, what you may need to do is refrain from taking action and refrain from overthinking for a while. And this is easier said than done, I know. When we feel uncomfortable, we tend to want to do anything we can to stop feeling uncomfortable. Learning how to sit still with our discomfort, learning how to carry our discomfort through our lives, learning how to let our internal conflicts and confusion just exist for a little while takes practice. And it also takes willingness. And I want to suggest that a great reason to be willing to allow our conflicts and our discomfort and our confusion to simply exist for a little while and to tolerate it for a little while is that when we can let the dust settle, when we can let the emotional intensity abate a little, we will then be able to think more clearly and make decisions about what we really want, and then decide what actions will help us get to the things we really want to experience in life, right? That's the whole point here. Impulsive decisions usually do not have the same kinds of outcomes as decisions that are made deliberately from a place of relative calm. So, for instance, we might break up with our affair partner during the holidays because we're sure it's the best solution to our internal conflict and it's the best thing to do for them, given how we're feeling about our spouse these days, only to wake up a week later and realize that we were just like in the midst of this like weird nostalgia induced like emotional episode. And then we call our affair partner a day or a week later and we explain all of this to them. We say, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I was so confused when I tried to end things. I don't know what I was thinking. And now I really want you back. And they're like, what are you talking about? You broke my heart. I don't trust you anymore. And all of this just makes life so much more complicated for everybody, starting with ourselves. Now, here's the fun part. I've got to point out that all of this may sound somewhat contradictory to other things I have said about making decisions on this podcast. At times, I've talked about how important it is to be aware of putting off making decisions, to be aware of putting off making changes in our relationships. And here's the deal. Both things are true. Finding reasons to put off making decisions or looking for reasons to put off taking action usually does not help us get more of what we want in life. But there's a difference between putting off doing things because we think it's going to be easier later and pausing when a sudden burst of confusion arises and waiting for a moment before we act impulsively, right? So there's this like whole spectrum of like what, like quality of action, I guess you could say. There's delaying action and there's like super impulsive action. And we don't necessarily want to go to either end of the spectrum. We want to find a way to act deliberately and intentionally without acting out of urgency and without dragging our feet or trying to avoid action indefinitely, right? So if you have suddenly become confused about what you want in your relationships, if you have suddenly become uncertain about what you want, if a whole bunch of really intense doubt has come over you and come seemingly out of nowhere, that's a very different situation from knowing what you want and not doing anything about it. If a whole bunch of new and intense emotions have come over you, it's a great sign that you need to slow down, let the emotional dust settle, and then get really clear on what you're thinking before you make decisions or take action. So if you're in this kind of a situation, if you're in the midst of a confusing moment that has seemingly come out of nowhere, you were certain about things 2 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago or whatever, and now all of a sudden you aren't, here's what I suggest you do. Number one, Decide on purpose that you are not going to make any major decisions or take any significant actions while your emotions are running high. Now, this may seem really hard or maybe even impossible. Your mind may tell you that you have to do something. So ask yourself this: what is the something that you think you have to do? And what do you think will actually happen if you don't do it? Question number two. No, not question. This is just thing number two that I'm suggesting that you do. Decide on purpose that you are not going to make other people's feelings or desires or demands your concern right now. So to continue with the example I've been using today, if you have been distancing yourself from your affair partner during the holidays and they're getting upset about that, this may seem like a problem that you have to solve. But what if it isn't? What if this situation isn't an emergency? That doesn't mean you don't care about their feelings, and it doesn't mean you have to ignore them completely. But nor do you have to make it your job to try and manage their experience or to try and make things better for them. You are definitely responsible for your own actions, but sometimes taking some time to pause and let the dust settle so that you can think clearly about what you want is the most responsible thing you can do. And finally, number three, decide on purpose that you are not going to overthink your situation and send yourself into a state of paralysis through analysis. Again, your brain may tell you that it's valuable to endlessly ruminate on your circumstances and that you have to keep thinking about what's going on. But really, what's going to happen if you don't? What's going to happen? Ask yourself that, right? What will happen if I stop thinking about this? Will anything bad happen? Guess what? The answer is no, I assure you, but you have to believe that for yourself. If you want to give your mind something to do, I encourage you to ask yourself this question: what do I know for sure right now? Put your brain to work on that one, right? And the great thing about this question is that you can ask yourself it anytime in relation to any topic. And this is a really good one because it starts to propel us out of the land of uncertainty and confusion and doubt. We sometimes love to tell ourselves how much we don't know, but we usually know more than we think. We're usually sure of a lot more than we think we are. And recognizing what we're sure of is so important for creating a sense of certainty, which is something that we can do intentionally and often must do intentionally. And it's important because it helps us work our way out of our tendency to indulge in uncertainty if we happen to have that tendency. And a lot of us certainly do. So, what does all of this lead to? You may be wondering. If I give myself some time to let my emotional dust settle and I focus on identifying what I'm certain of, what will that lead to? Well, by giving yourself a timeout of sorts, you may find that the answers to your questions become really clear to you after taking the time to pause. Maybe after your intense burst of confusion passes, you realize you really do want to pursue a relationship with your affair partner. You might realize that your doubts during the holidays came from you thinking about all of the past holidays you've spent with your spouse and how different it will be to not celebrate the holidays in the same way in the future. And you might have been really, sad about that and confused about that and feeling, all sorts of interesting feelings about those possibilities, right? But after the intensity of those emotions passed, it was clear to you that although you may have some fondness for the way you've spent holiday time with your spouse or your family in the past, you still want to leave your marriage. That's just one possible outcome, of course, right? You could realize something completely different. But the point that I'm trying to make is that sometimes clarity comes to us rather easily if we can just slow down for a moment. But if you find that your confusion goes on, you may want to invest in getting some help with making sense of what you're thinking. You may want some support and some guidance. And if you do, that is what I am here for. If you'd like to work with me, and figure out what you want to do about your relationship stuff, you can schedule an introductory coaching session with me through my website, mariemurphyphd.com. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. Please rate and review the show on iTunes if you've enjoyed what you've heard. And have a great week. I will talk to you next time. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to Your Secret is Safe with Me with Dr. Marie Murphy. Make sure to click subscribe to get updates on our latest episodes.